The massive council chamber stretched out like a metal ocean, filled with beings from 100 different worlds. Floating platforms carried delegates with tentacles, wings, and forms that defied easy description. The air hummed with translation, devices working overtime to convert thoughts into words that other species might understand. Ambassador Minho sat quietly at the human section, a small cluster of simple metal chairs that looked plain next to the elaborate crystal thrones and bioformed seats around them. His dark suit was unremarkable among the flowing robes and exotic armor of other delegates. Nobody paid much attention to the humans anymore. They had been part of the council for 2 centuries, always helpful, always reliable, always forgettable. Minho checked his datapad one last time. Everything was in order. The trade agreements with the Valari Empire were complete, shipping schedules had been filed, and all the paperwork was properly signed. It looked like routine business, but every document contained careful language that would let humanity step away from their obligations without breaking any laws. The human delegation recognizes Ambassador Minho of Earth, announced the council speaker, a tall, blue being whose voice echoed through translation systems. Minho stood and walked to the center platform. Around him, alien delegates chatted among themselves or reviewed their own business. The Karathi representative was polishing one of his many eyes. A Zephyrian delegate seemed to be sleeping, her crystalline body dimming to a soft glow. Honored council members, Minho began, his voice carrying the same calm tone he had used for decades. Humanity submits the final quarterly reports for our trade coordination with the Valari Empire, agricultural support for the Outer Rim colonies, and diplomatic mediation services for the benthic crystalline border disputes. The words were boring. They were meant to be. Hidden in the technical language were humanity's last official acts as council members. The trade coordination was ending. Agricultural support was being transferred to local systems. Diplomatic services were concluding. These reports mark the completion of humanity's current commitments under Council Resolution 847 Delta, Minho continued. All outstanding obligations have been fulfilled. Earth's colonial administration has completed its restructuring program and will be implementing new efficiency protocols. A few delegates glanced up at the mention of efficiency protocols. Humans were always talking about efficiency. It was one of the things that made them useful. They could organize things that other species found too complicated or boring. What the delegates did not understand was that the restructuring program had been quietly moving humans away from positions where other species depended on them. For the past 3 years, human engineers had been training alien replacements, human translators had been updating automatic systems, and human administrators had been simplifying procedures so others could handle them, or so it seemed. In reality, the training had been incomplete. The automatic systems had hidden dependencies. The simplified procedures relied on human oversight that was now disappearing. But none of the alien delegates knew this. They saw humans as helpful assistants, not as the people who actually made their civilization work. Minho finished his presentation and returned to his seat. The council moved on to other business, a territorial dispute between the Makari Federation and 2 smaller systems, trade complaints from the Outer Rim, a request for peacekeeping forces to handle pirate activity near the galactic core. As each issue came up, Minho noticed how often human involvement was mentioned, human translators helping species communicate, human ships providing logistics, support, human administrators keeping track of complex legal requirements, humans everywhere doing the work that nobody else wanted to do. In her seat beside him, Hyeju made quiet notes on her datapad. She was Earth's military liaison, responsible for coordinating human peacekeeping forces throughout Council space. Her notes looked like routine personnel updates, but they were actually recall orders. Human soldiers, engineers, and support staff were being quietly pulled back from their positions. The aliens barely noticed. Human peacekeepers had always been considered second-rate compared to the elite forces of major powers like the Karathi Empire or the Hegemony. They were useful for boring tasks like escorting supply convoys or maintaining equipment, but not important enough to worry about. What the aliens did not realize was that human peacekeepers had been doing much more than escort duty. They had been preventing conflicts through careful intelligence gathering, maintaining crucial equipment that other species did not fully understand, and serving as neutral mediators in disputes that could have escalated into wars. Dae-hyun sat in the back row, reviewing colonial reports on his tablet. As head of Human Colonial Administration, he oversaw human settlements on 47 different worlds. His reports showed routine administrative changes, population adjustments, resource allocation updates, infrastructure modifications. The reality was more dramatic. Human colonies were being consolidated. Essential personnel were being moved to secure locations. Valuable equipment and research data were being transferred to Earth or to hidden facilities that the Council did not know about. The most important changes were happening on worlds that the Council considered unimportant. Desert planets with small human settlements, remote research stations studying seemingly useless phenomena, asteroid mining operations that appeared to lose money every year. These locations were actually humanity's most valuable assets. The desert. Settlements were testing advanced terraforming technology. The research stations were developing new forms of faster-than-light travel. The mining operations were extracting rare materials needed for technologies that were decades ahead of Council science. But to alien observers, humans were just doing what humans always did, organizing things efficiently and working in places that nobody else wanted to go. The Council session dragged on for hours. Delegate after delegate spoke about problems that required solutions, resources that needed management, conflicts that demanded mediation. In every case, the proposed solutions depended on human involvement, usually in ways that the speakers did not fully acknowledge. Minho listened to it all with growing certainty that humanity was making the right choice. The Council species saw humans as useful servants, not as equal partners. They took human contributions for granted while treating human ideas as inferior copies of alien wisdom. The Zephyrian delegate Veltar was particularly annoying. During a break in the session, he approached the human section with his usual condescending smile. "I hope you small mammals are not working too hard," he said, his translated voice carrying a tone of fake concern. "It is good that your species has learned to accept its proper role in galactic civilization." Minho nodded politely. "We have learned a great deal about our role, Counselor Veltar." Veltar laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Perhaps one day your people will develop the vision needed for true leadership. Until then, we appreciate your administrative skills." "We will continue to serve the galaxy's needs," Minho replied, choosing his words carefully. What he did not say was that humanity had indeed learned about their role. They had learned that they were holding together a civilization that did not respect them. They had learned that their partners would exploit their skills while denying their intelligence. Most importantly, they had learned that they did not need the Council nearly as much as the Council needed them. The session finally ended as the artificial day cycle dimmed the chamber's lights. Delegates began filing out, returning to their ships or their embassy quarters. The humans gathered their materials and left as quietly as they had arrived. None of the aliens realized they had just witnessed the last official human participation in Council business. Tomorrow there would be no human delegates in the chamber. Next week, there would be no human ships responding to Council requests. Next month, there would be no human colonies accepting Council oversight. And the galaxy would begin to discover just how much it had depended on the small mammals who had learned their place. 6 months had passed since the last human delegate walked out of the Council chambers. At first, nobody noticed their absence. The galaxy was huge, and there were always plenty of other issues to worry about. Trade flowed as usual. Ships moved. Between systems, reports came in from colonies and outposts across known space. Then things started going wrong. The first sign of trouble came from the Karathi Empire's home system. First Minister Thexwa stood in his crystal palace, looking at reports that made no sense. Food shipments from the benthic systems had simply stopped arriving. Not delayed, not reduced, just stopped. "Contact the Benthic Trade Authority," he told his aide, a younger Karathi whose forearms moved nervously as he worked his communication console. "I have tried, First Minister. They say they are waiting for shipping coordinates and customs clearance. Codes. They claim these were always provided by human trade coordinators." Thexwa's large eyes blinked in confusion. "Humans? What do humans have to do with our food imports?" The aide checked his records. According to these files, a human named Jin Wu had been managing trade logistics between our empire and 17 different systems. He coordinated shipping schedules, handled currency exchanges, and managed customs procedures. One human handled all of that? Thexwa could not believe it. Impossible. Our trade networks are too complex for a single being to manage. But as they dug deeper into the records, the truth became clear. Jin Wu had not just been managing trade between the Karathi Empire and other systems. He had been the invisible center of a web that connected dozens of different alien economies. He translated not just languages, but different concepts of value, time, and ownership that made trade between species possible. Without him, the Karathi discovered that they could not even communicate effectively with their trading partners. The benthic species thought in terms of seasonal cycles that lasted 3 standard years. The hegemony measured value based on crystalline harmonics that no other species understood. The Outer Rim colonies used barter systems that seemed random to everyone else. Jinwu had somehow made all of these different approaches work together. Now he was gone, and nobody knew how to replace him. Similar problems were appearing throughout Council space. On the border between the Makari Federation and the crystalline hegemony, old tensions that had been quiet for decades suddenly flared into violence. The Makari commander Velketh stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching enemy ships mass on the other side of the disputed border. "When did the hegemony start claiming the Tertius system again?" he asked his intelligence officer. 3 months ago, sir. They say we violated the Solace Accords by mining in their territory. The Solace Accords clearly state that Tertius is a neutral zone." Velketh slammed one of his tentacles against the command console. "Contact the council mediators immediately." "Sir, there are no mediators available. The human mediation service has been discontinued." Velketh paused. He vaguely remembered a human female who had attended their border negotiations for years. Sora, he thought her name was. She had always sat quietly in the corner, taking notes and occasionally asking questions that seemed obvious. He had assumed she was just a secretary or translator. What happened to the human mediators? "They withdrew from all council operations 6 months ago, sir. There has been no explanation." As Velketh studied the tactical display, he realized something disturbing. Every major border dispute in this region had been stable for decades. The Solace Accords, the Tertius Agreement, the Neutral Zone Protocols, all of these had been negotiated with human involvement. Not human leadership, but human participation. Sora had not been taking obvious notes. She had been asking the right questions to prevent misunderstandings. When the Makari spoke of territorial water rights, she made sure the crystalline hegemony understood they meant space mining, not actual water. When the hegemony talked about harmonic resonance zones, she helped the Makari understand they meant areas where their ship's engines would interfere with hegemony communication networks. Without her patient translation work, the old agreements were breaking down. Each side interpreted the treaties differently, and there was nobody left to explain what the words actually meant. The crisis spread faster than anyone expected. In the council chambers, emergency sessions were called daily as reports of system failures poured in from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian delegate Veltar, who had mocked humans as small mammals, now found himself facing a disaster he could not understand. His species' advanced sensor networks were failing one by one. The quantum communication arrays that connected Zephyrian colonies were becoming unreliable. How is this possible? He demanded from his technicians. These systems were built with Zephyrian technology. They should not depend on any other species. His chief engineer, a being whose crystalline body flickered with nervous energy, brought up technical diagrams on the main display. Sir, the individual components are Zephyrian, but the integration protocols were designed by human engineers. They created the software that allows our quantum communicators to work with the navigation systems and the power distribution networks. Humans designed our integration protocols? Veltar's voice rose to a painful pitch. Impossible. Humans barely understand their own primitive technology. Sir, I have reviewed the technical records. The integration work was extremely sophisticated. The human engineers understood our quantum mechanics better than we realized. They created systems that were more efficient than our original designs. Veltar stared at the failing network displays. The humans had not just been maintaining Zephyrian technology, they had been improving it, making it work better than the Zephyrians themselves could manage. And they had done it so quietly that nobody noticed. Meanwhile, in the outer rim systems, the situation was becoming desperate. The plague that had been slowly spreading through several colonies was now killing thousands daily. The cure had been close to completion, but the research had stopped. Dr. Yexetal of the Hegemony Medical Authority reviewed the abandoned research files with growing horror. "Where is Dr. Nari?" she asked her research team. "The human researcher? She left 6 months ago with all the other humans. We assumed her work was not important." "Not important?" Dr. Yextal pulled up Nari's research records. "She was coordinating medical research between 12 different species. Look at this data. She was combining Karathi genetic therapy, Zephyrian, quantum healing, and benthic biochemistry into a single treatment protocol. The research files showed something that should have been impossible. Each species had developed medical techniques that worked for their own biology, but nobody had ever figured out how to combine different approaches. Nari had been the bridge between species, translating medical concepts that seemed incompatible into treatments that worked for everyone. Without her coordination, the research teams could not even communicate their results to each other. The Karathi genetic therapy data was useless to the Zephyrian quantum specialists. The benthic biochemistry made no sense to anyone else. The cure that had been days away from completion was now impossible to finish. Back on the Karathi home, World First Minister Thexwa was facing the reality that his empire might collapse within months. Food shortages were spreading as trade networks failed. Border conflicts were escalating without human mediators. Communication with other systems was becoming difficult without human translation services. "Contact Earth," he ordered his communication staff. "We need to speak with the human government immediately." "Sir, we have been trying for months. Earth's communication systems are not responding to any signals. Their entire star system appears to be blocked by some kind of interference." "What kind of interference?" "Unknown, sir. Our signals reach the Sol system, but nothing comes back. It is as if the entire human species has simply vanished." Thexwa felt a chill run through his crystalline body. The humans had not vanished. They had left. And they had taken with them all the skills and knowledge that had been holding galactic civilization together. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was learning what it meant to function without the small mammals who had learned their place. The council chambers, once filled with confident delegates discussing the galaxy's future, now echoed with desperate voices arguing about how to prevent complete collapse. And in the human section, the empty chairs served as a silent reminder of everything they had lost. The crisis was spreading faster than wildfire through dry grass. What had started as minor inconveniences 6 months ago was now threatening the survival of entire civilizations. The galactic economy was in complete free fall, and nobody seemed to know how to stop it. On the agricultural world of Bentos 7, millions of beings faced starvation. The crops that had fed three-star systems for decades were dying in the fields. The local administrator, a benthic named Grelmore, stood in what used to be a thriving farm and tried to understand what had gone wrong. The soil analysis shows severe nutrient depletion, reported his agricultural specialist. The crop rotation patterns are failing. The irrigation systems are producing water that kills the plants instead of helping them grow. Grelmore picked up a handful of the gray, lifeless dirt. How is this possible? These farms have been productive for 50 years. We followed the same procedures as always. Sir, I have been reviewing the old records. The procedures we have been following were designed by a human agricultural advisor named Wu Jin. He created a complex system that balanced soil chemistry, crop rotation, and water treatment specifically for our climate and biology. One human designed all of this? Yes, sir, and not just for our world. According to these files, he created similar systems for 43 different planets, each one adapted for local conditions and alien biology. The systems were so complex that our people never fully understood how they worked. We just followed the instructions. Grelmore felt sick. Wu Jin had not just been giving advice about farming, he had been solving problems that nobody else even knew existed. Each world had different soil, different weather, different biology. Somehow, this human had figured out how to make Earth crops grow in alien environments, and alien crops grow better than they ever had before. Without his knowledge, the carefully balanced systems were collapsing. Soil chemistry was changing in ways that made no sense. Crops that had grown well together for decades were now killing each other. Water treatment systems designed for human oversight were producing chemical mixtures that poisoned the ground. The food crisis was spreading to dozens of worlds, and nobody knew how to fix it. Meanwhile, in the medical research centers of the hegemony, the plague was winning. Dr. Yextal worked frantically with her reduced team, trying to complete the research that Nari had started. But every day brought new deaths and new failures. The Karathi genetic therapy is rejecting the Zephyrian quantum treatment, reported her assistant. Every time we try to combine them, the patient's cellular structure becomes unstable. Dr. Yextal stared at the test results. Nari made this combination work. I have seen her reports. How did she do it? I do not know, sir. Her notes mention something called bioharmonic resonance adjustment, but none of our specialists understand what that means. The truth was becoming clear. Nari had not just been coordinating research between different species. She had been inventing entirely new medical concepts that bridge the gap between incompatible alien biologies. Her work had required understanding Karathi genetics, Zephyrian quantum mechanics, benthic biochemistry, and probably a dozen other fields that no single being should have been able to master. Without her, the medical teams could not even communicate effectively, let alone continue her research. The plague continued to spread, and the cure remained impossibly out of reach, but the worst was yet to come. Admiral Zex Thule of the Hegemony War Fleet stood on his command bridge, watching his supposedly superior technology fail in the most humiliating way possible. His fleet was under attack by a small group of pirates, and his advanced weapons could not hit anything. "What is wrong with our targeting systems?" he demanded from his weapons officer. "Sir, the targeting computers are malfunctioning. They keep calculating firing solutions for targets that are not where the sensors say they are. How is that possible? Our quantum sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy." His chief engineer, a nervous being whose crystal body was flickering with stress, brought up technical displays that made no sense. "Sir, I have discovered something disturbing. Our targeting systems were designed to work with our sensors, but the integration software was written by human engineers. The software translates sensor data into firing coordinates. Humans wrote our weapons software? Admiral Zexthul's voice cracked with disbelief. Yes, sir. And not just for our ships. I have contacted other fleets and they report similar problems. The humans created integration software for the entire hegemony military. Without their programming, our weapons cannot communicate properly with our sensors. Admiral Zexthul watched helplessly as pirate ships that should have been easy targets ran circles around his powerful fleet. The hegemony's advanced technology was useless without the human software that made it all work together. Similar disasters were happening throughout Council space. The Karathi Empire's transport networks were failing as human-designed scheduling. Systems crashed. The Zephyrian communication networks were going dark as human-maintained quantum links stopped working. The Outer Rim colonies were becoming isolated as human-coordinated supply chains collapsed. In the council chambers, emergency sessions were now happening around the clock. Delegates who had once debated grand policies now argued desperately about basic survival. "We must contact Earth immediately," declared First Minister Thexwa of the Karathi Empire. "This crisis requires human expertise to resolve." "Earth is not responding to any communications," replied the Zephyrian delegate Veltar, his voice much less confident than it had been months earlier. "We have sent diplomatic missions, trade delegations, even emergency distress calls. Nothing gets through." "Then we must send ships to the Sol system," suggested the Benthic representative. "Direct contact may be our only option." "We have tried," said Admiral Kexmore of the Joint Council Fleet. 3 expeditionary forces have been dispatched to human space. None have returned. A cold silence fell over the chamber. 3 entire fleets had vanished without a trace while trying to reach Earth. Either humanity was in terrible danger, or they were much more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Makari delegate Velketh spoke what everyone was thinking. "Is it possible that we have misunderstood the humans? Perhaps they were more important to our civilization than we realized?" Veltar, who had spent years mocking humans as inferior beings, now faced the collapse of everything he had taken for granted. Important? They were support staff, administrators, translators. How could support staff be essential to our survival? "Maybe," said Thexwa quietly, "they were not support staff. Maybe they were the foundation that everything else was built on." The chamber fell silent again as delegates considered this possibility. For centuries, they had seen humans as useful helpers who took care of boring details while more advanced species handled the important work. But now, with the boring details failing catastrophically, they were beginning to understand that the details had not been boring at all. They had been essential. The human section of the chamber, with its empty chairs and silent communication stations, seemed to mock them. The small mammals had indeed learned their place in galactic civilization. They had learned that their place was at the center of everything, holding it all together with skills and knowledge that nobody else possessed. And now they were gone, taking their knowledge with them. The galaxy was discovering what happened. When the foundation was removed from beneath a great civilization, it collapsed. Commander Yexadal of the Karathi Navy had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. 3 expeditionary fleets had already vanished while trying to reach the Sol system. But with half the galaxy starving and the other half at war, someone had to find the humans and convince them to return. His fleet was the largest ever assembled by the Council. Ships from every major power floated in formation around his flagship. Karathi crystal destroyers, Zephyrian quantum cruisers, hegemony battle platforms, and vessels from a dozen smaller species. It was an impressive display of galactic military power, or it would have been, if any of it worked properly. "Navigation systems are still malfunctioning," reported his helmsman. "We can plot a course to the Sol system, but our arrival time estimates keep changing randomly. Weapons are at 60% efficiency," added his tactical officer. "The targeting computers cannot sync properly with the sensor arrays." Commander Yexdal nodded grimly. Like every other fleet in Council space, his ships were crippled by the absence of human integration software. They could fight, but not well. They could travel, but not efficiently. Everything that had once made them superior was now working against them. "Proceed to the Sol system," he ordered. "All ships, maintain defensive formation and be ready for anything." The journey took 3 weeks instead of the usual 10 days. Navigation errors forced them to drop out of faster than light, travel several times to recalculate their position. When they finally reached the edge of human space, Commander Yexdal could not believe what he saw. The Sol system was surrounded by a network of stations and platforms that had not existed in any Council records. Massive structures orbited the outer planets, connected by streams of energy that his sensors could not identify. Ships moved between the stations in patterns that seemed random but felt purposeful. "Sir," said his sensor officer, his voice shaking slightly, "I am detecting over 10,000 vessels in this system. Most of them are designs I have never seen before." 10,000 ships? Commander Yexdal stared at the tactical display. "That is impossible. Council records show that humanity had fewer than 500 vessels total." "Sir, these readings are accurate, and the energy signatures, they are unlike anything in our databases. These ships are using technologies that we do not understand." Before Commander Yexdal could respond, his communication systems activated on their own. A calm human voice spoke in perfect Karathi, without any need for translation devices. "Commander Yexdal of the Karathi Navy, you are entering protected space. Please state your business." The voice was polite but firm. Commander Yexdal recognized the tone from years of working with human diplomats. It was the same pleasant manner they had always used, but now it carried an undertone of absolute authority. "This is an official Council diplomatic mission," Commander Yexdal replied. "We request permission to speak with Earth's government about the current galactic crisis." "One moment, please." The connection went silent for several minutes. During the wait, Commander Yexdal watched more human ships approach his fleet. They moved with precision that made his own vessels look clumsy by comparison. Worse, his sensors could barely track them. The human ships seemed to bend space around themselves in ways that should not have been possible. "Commander Yexdal," the voice returned, "you may approach the 4th planet with a single ship and a minimal crew. Your fleet will remain at its current position under escort." "Escort?" Commander Yexdal looked at his tactical display again. He had not seen any human ships move into escort positions. But suddenly, his sensors were detecting energy signatures all around his fleet. The humans had surrounded them without being noticed. "Do not be alarmed," the voice continued. "The escort is for your protection as well as ours. This system contains technologies that could be dangerous to vessels not equipped with proper shielding." Commander Yexdal took a small shuttle to the 4th planet, which his old star charts identified as Mars. What he found there defied everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. The planet was covered with cities that gleamed like jewels in the thin atmosphere. Massive domes contained gardens and forests that should not have been able to survive in the Martian environment. Ships the size of asteroids moved cargo between the surface and orbital stations with casual efficiency. He was met at a landing facility by a human woman in a simple gray uniform. She was unremarkable in appearance, the kind of person who would have blended into the background during council meetings. But when she spoke, Commander Yexdal heard the same quiet authority that had marked all his communications since entering the system. "Commander, I am Yerim, Minister of External Affairs for the Earth Federation. Welcome to Mars." "Minister Yerim," Commander Yexdal began, "the Galactic Council urgently needs human assistance. Without your people, our civilization is collapsing. Billions are dying from starvation, disease, and war." Yerim nodded sympathetically. "We are aware of the situation. We have been monitoring Council space since our departure. Then you know how desperate things have become. Surely humanity cannot simply watch while the galaxy destroys itself. Commander, may I ask you a question? Yarim gestured for him to follow her through the facility. Through transparent walls, he could see human technicians working with equipment that looked decades ahead of anything in Council space. Of course, Minister. During the centuries that humans served on the Council, how were we treated? What was our status among the member species? Commander Yexdal hesitated. The honest answer was uncomfortable. Humans were valued for your practical skills. You provided useful services. We were treated as servants, Yarim said gently. Useful servants, but servants nonetheless. Our ideas were dismissed as primitive copies of superior alien concepts. Our contributions were taken for granted. When we spoke in council sessions, we were tolerated rather than heard. They walked through a research laboratory where human scientists worked alongside beings that Commander Yexdal did not recognize. The equipment around them hummed with energy patterns that his trained eye could not identify. But we were always watching, Yarim continued, always learning. Every technology that Council species developed, we studied and improved upon. Every scientific breakthrough, we refined and advanced. Every system you created, we found ways to make work better. You were spying on us? Commander Yexdal felt a chill of fear. We were learning from you, Yarim corrected. Just as any student learns from teachers, the difference is that we proved to be very good students. They reached an observation deck that looked out over the Martian landscape. In the distance, Commander Yexdal could see construction projects that stretched to the horizon. Massive machines were reshaping the planet itself, creating an environment that could support billions of beings. Minister, if humanity possesses such advanced capabilities, why did you leave? Why not claim your rightful place as leaders of the Council? Yarim smiled sadly. Because we learned something important about leadership, Commander. True leaders do not need to dominate others to prove their worth. They do not need to be worshipped or feared to be effective. A new voice joined the conversation. The Council species were never interested in learning from us. They were interested in using us. Commander Yexdal turned to see a human man in military uniform approaching. He moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, and his presence seemed to fill the observation deck. Commander Yexdal, this is Taman, our Minister of Defense, Yarim said. Taman nodded politely. Your 3 previous expeditionary fleets are safe, by the way. We detained them when they attempted to force their way into our space. Their crews are being well treated while we decide what to do with them. You captured 3 entire fleets? Commander Yexdal could not hide his shock. We disabled them, Taman corrected. Their crews never realized what happened. One moment they were preparing to enter the Sol system, the next moment they were in our custody. No shots were fired. No one was harmed. How is that possible? Taman and Yarim exchanged glances. Commander, Yarim said, humanity spent centuries pretending to be less capable than we actually were. We allowed the Council species to believe they were superior, while we quietly surpassed them in every field of science and technology. The integration software that your species depended on, Taman added. It was not just translation programs. It was advanced artificial intelligence that we embedded in every system throughout Council space. We could have shut down your entire civilization at any time. Commander Yexdal felt the weight of this revelation. Why did you not? Because we hoped that someday the Council species would learn to treat us as equals rather than servants, Yarim replied. We waited 2 centuries for that to happen. When it became clear that it never would, we decided to find partners who were worth our time. Through the observation deck windows, Commander Yexdal could see ships arriving from other star systems. But these were not human vessels. They carried beings he had never seen before, species that apparently existed outside of Council space. We have found them, Yarim said, following his gaze. Species that approach first contact with curiosity. rather than arrogance. Partners who are interested in cooperation rather than domination. 5 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. The galaxy looked very different now. Where once there had been a grand confederation of hundreds of worlds working together, now there were scattered islands of civilization, struggling to survive in an ocean of chaos. On the former Council homeworld, the Great Chamber where delegates had once debated the future of galactic civilization now stood mostly empty. Dust covered the floating platforms where proud alien representatives had once displayed their power. The massive screens that had shown star maps and trade routes were dark and silent. Only a few dozen worlds still maintained any form of organized government. The Karathi Empire had shrunk to just 3 star systems, barely able to feed their remaining population. The mighty Zephyrian Federation existed now only in name, their quantum communication networks reduced to basic radio signals between isolated colonies. The crystalline hegemony had fragmented into dozens of small city-states that fought each other over the few resources they could still access. First Minister Thexwa of what remained of the Karathi Empire sat in his crystal palace, reading the latest reports from his scouts. The news was always the same. More systems going dark, more colonies abandoning civilization to return to primitive survival, more species retreating to their home worlds to wait for the end. "Any word from the human territories?" he asked his aide, though he already knew the answer. "The same as always, First Minister. They acknowledge our messages, but provide only basic responses. No offers of technological assistance, no invitations to negotiate new agreements." Thexwa nodded sadly. Humanity had not completely ignored the former Council worlds. When the plague had threatened to wipe out the remaining benthic colonies, human medical ships had arrived with vaccines and treatments that saved millions of lives. When the Zephyrian homeworld faced complete starvation, human cargo vessels had delivered enough food to prevent mass death. But these acts of mercy came with no strings attached, no demands for gratitude, and no offers of permanent solutions. The humans would prevent genocide, but they would not rebuild the civilization that the Council species had allowed to collapse. On Earth, Prime Minister Dong Yun reviewed the latest intelligence reports from former Council space with a mixture of sadness and frustration. His advisors had recommended complete isolation from the galactic crisis, but Dong Yun could not bring himself to watch entire species die from problems that humanity could easily solve. "The Makari Federation has officially dissolved," reported his intelligence chief. "The remaining Makari colonies have formed 3 separate governments, and they are fighting each other over mineral rights in the Tertius system, the same system that Sora used to mediate disputes over for decades," Dongyun said quietly. They learned nothing. "Sir, we have received another request for technological assistance from the Karathi Empire. They are asking for agricultural advisors to help restore food production on their colony worlds." Dongyun considered this carefully. Humanity could easily solve the Karathi food crisis. Wujin's agricultural techniques, refined and improved over the past 5 years, could turn desert worlds into gardens. But giving the Karathi that technology would not teach them to value the people who created it. "Send them emergency food supplies," he decided. "Enough to prevent starvation, but nothing more. And make sure our ships leave immediately after delivery. No extended contact." This had become humanity's standard policy toward their former Council partners. They would prevent humanitarian disasters, but they would not provide the tools for these species to rebuild their old civilization. That civilization had been built on the assumption that some beings were naturally superior to others, and humanity would not help restore that kind of system. Instead, Earth's attention was focused on the other side of the galaxy, where first, contact with new species was producing very different results. Seojin stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel New Horizon, watching a truly alien landscape scroll past on the main screen. His ship was approaching the home world of a species that called themselves the Keth Mori. reptilian beings who had developed interstellar travel independently of both human and council technology. Unlike the arrogant council species, the Kethmori had approached first contact with genuine curiosity and respect. When human explorers had first encountered them 2 years ago, the Kethmori had immediately asked to learn about human culture, human science, and human philosophy. They offered to share their own knowledge freely, without demanding proof of human worthiness or trying to establish dominance. "Captain," reported his communications officer, "the Kethmori delegation is ready to receive us. They have prepared cultural exchanges and scientific demonstrations just as we have." Seojin smiled. This was how first contact should work. Two species meeting as equals, each bringing their own strengths to a partnership that would benefit both sides. The Kethmori had developed biotechnology that was centuries ahead of human capabilities. In return, humans had shared their expertise in quantum mechanics and artificial intelligence. The result was a collaboration that was advancing both civilizations faster than either could have progressed alone. Human-designed quantum computers, running Kethmori biological processors, were solving problems that neither species could have tackled independently. Kethmori biotechnology enhanced with human AI was creating medical treatments that seemed like magic. "Sir," his science officer added, "the Joint Research Station in orbit is reporting another breakthrough. The combination of our materials science and their bioengineering has produced a new type of spacecraft hull that is both self-repairing and incredibly strong." This was the kind of partnership that humanity had always hoped to find. Not the master-servant relationship that the Council had offered, but true cooperation between equals who respected each other's capabilities. Similar partnerships were developing with other species that humans had discovered beyond Council space. The Velkarim, energy beings who existed partially outside normal space-time, were teaching humans about dimensional physics in exchange for lessons in computer science. The Zothani, a collective intelligence made up of millions of small organisms, were sharing their knowledge of biotechnology while learning human approaches to individual creativity and innovation. Each new partnership followed the same pattern. First contact based on mutual respect, followed by careful cultural exchange, then scientific collaboration that benefited everyone involved. It was the kind of galactic civilization that humanity had always dreamed of joining. Meanwhile, in the ruins of former Council space, the surviving alien species were slowly learning hard lessons about arrogance and respect. Some, like the younger Karathi who had never known the old days of casual superiority, were beginning to understand what their ancestors had lost. On a small research station orbiting the former Council capital, a young Zephyrian scientist named Kirathex worked alone, trying to repair quantum communication equipment with tools that were barely adequate for the task. She had spent months studying the technical manuals that human engineers had left behind, slowly beginning to understand the elegant complexity of their integration systems. "If only I could ask them how this works," she said to herself, staring at a circuit diagram that seemed to contain layers of meaning she could not quite grasp. Kirathex represented a new generation of Council species who understood what their elders had thrown away. They collected every piece of human technology they could find, not to copy it, but to understand the thinking behind it. They studied human philosophy and human history, trying to learn what had made this species so successful. Most importantly, they were learning humility, the hard way. As Seojun's ship entered orbit around the Kethmori homeworld, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had spent centuries trying to prove their worth to species who saw them as inferior. Now those same species were desperately trying to understand what had made humanity so superior. The answer was simple, but it had taken the collapse of galactic civilization for the Council species to learn it. True strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. Real intelligence was not about proving superiority, but about finding ways to work together. And genuine leadership meant helping others succeed, not keeping them dependent. Humanity, had learned these lessons while serving as the Council's support staff. Now they were building a new kind of galactic civilization, one species at a time, with partners who understood that cooperation was stronger than domination. The galaxy was still vast and full of wonders, but now humanity was exploring it with friends who valued their contributions rather than masters who took them for granted. It was a much better arrangement.